Okay, and change our view. Hello, everybody, and welcome officially near and far via Zoom and Facebook to the Laurie Okuma Memorial Reading. I'm Megan Marshall, and I'm the director of the U.S.V.I Living Writers Series. This is the final event of the fall semester, as I mentioned, which is a bit sad, but we are going out on a high note with this spectacular poet whose work is sure to keep us warm throughout the winter months. But before I invite her to begin, I'd like to thank those who have helped to make this event and this series possible this semester. And that includes our friends from Love Library, of course, Markle Tumlin, my amazing co-host, and also Danya Mukahal, Laurel Bliss, and Rebecca Williamson. And I also want to thank the Department of English and Comparative Literature for their support. And tonight, I want to issue a very special thanks to the Nagoro and Okuma families for the endowment that allows us to honor the memory of a very special SDSU MFA alumna, who's Laurie Matsueda Okuma, by featuring the work of a woman poet or prose writer. In addition to earning her MFA, Laurie also taught at SDSU, and she was committed to bringing attention to women writers whose voices are often marginalized. So we're very happy to celebrate her legacy tonight, along with her family's continued support. So just a couple reminders again, if you're joining us via Zoom, keep your mic muted during the presentation. You'll have a chance to ask some questions a bit later. And as you may have heard, the event is being recorded. Lastly, please be sure to check out the U.S.V.I Living Writers series on YouTube. Our channel has recordings of all of our great events, as well as creative responses from SDSU students enrolled in the Living Writers class. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got new content dropping soon. So there's lots of great stuff for your viewing pleasure. You want to make sure that you check us out and subscribe. So without further ado, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce our featured reader. Born in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, and raised in Florida, Nicole Sealey is the author of Ordinary Beast, which is the finalist for the PEN Open Book and Hurston Wright Legacy Awards, and The Animal After Whom Other Animals Are Named, which was the winner of the Drinking Gourd Chapbook Poetry Prize. Her list of honors is impressive and includes the 2021 Forward Prize for Best Single Poem, the 2021 Granum Foundation Prize, a Rome Prize from the American Academy in Rome, a Hodder Fellowship from Princeton University, the Stanley Kunitz Memorial and Poetry International Prizes, as well as fellowships from the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, CantoMundo, Canem, MacDowell, and the National Endowment and New York Foundation for the Arts, among others. Her work has appeared in the Best American Poetry 2018 and 2019. And she's a visiting professor at Boston University and teaches in the MFA Writers Workshop and Paris program at New York University. The poet Jane Hirshfield asserts, "Great poems allow us not only to bear the tally and toll of our transients, but to perceive within their own continually surprising and continually generative abundance, a path through the grief of that insult into joy." The poems in Sealey's collection, Ordinary Beast, which explore notions of mortality, trauma, and embodiment, provide a powerful path, as Hirshfield mentions, from grief to joy. Given our current context, that path can be difficult to follow, as in the poem Happy Birthday to Me, where the speaker admits, "Had you asked, I could have told you I'm not doing especially well at being alive." But Sealey's work inhabits these dark truths, then moves with playful subversion and grace toward the light. It reminds us that despite all, we share this human condition, and thus entertain the angels with our brief animation. Of her work, Natasha Trethewey raves, "These are poems of thrilling sonic and syntactical play, formal dexterity, myth-making, and delight in the ordinary rendered strange by new juxtapositions." Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Nicole Sealey.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Megan. I appreciate it. Hope I can live up to it. A few people to thank, first of which the MFA in Creative Writing at San Diego State University, the family and friends of Laurie Matsueda Okuma herself, in whose honor memory this reading series is named, And of course, Sandra, Blas, and Megan for the invitation and the warm welcome, and all of you for being here tonight. It really is a pleasure, so thank you for having me. I'll read mostly poems from Ordinary Beasts, and then if time permits, I'll read an excerpt from the long project that I'm working on. So let's begin with some Ordinary Beast poems. This first poem is for my mom, and it's called "The First Person Who Will Live to Be 150 Years Old Has Already Been Born." Scientists say the average human life gets 3 months longer every year. By this math, death will be optional, like a tie, or dessert, or suffering. My mother asks whether I'd want to live forever. I'd get bored, I tell her. But she says there's so much to do, meaning she believes there's much she hasn't done. 30 years ago, she was the age I am now, but unlike me, too industrious to think about birds disappeared by rain. If only we had more time or enough money to be kept on ice until such a time, science could bring us back. Of late, my mother has begun to think life short-lived. I'm too young to convince her otherwise. The one and only occasion I was in the same room as the Mona Lisa, it was encased in glass behind what I imagine were velvet ropes. There's far less between ourselves and oblivion, skin that often defeats its very purpose. Or maybe its purpose isn't protection at all, but rather to provide a place similar to a doctor's waiting room in which to sit until our names are called. Hold your questions until the end. Mother, measure my wide open arms. We still have this much time to kill. All right, this next poem is called "Violence." You hear the high-pitched yowls of strays fighting for scraps tossed from a kitchen window. They sound like children you might have had you wanted children. Had you a maternal bone, you would wrench it from your belly and fling it from your fire escape, as if it were the stubborn shard now lodged in your wrist. No, you would hide it. Yes, you would hide it inside a barren nesting doll you've had since you were a child. Its smile reminds you of your father, who does not smile, nor does he believe you are his. You look just like your mother, he says, who looks just like a fire of suspicious origin. A body, I've read, can sustain its own sick burning, its own hell for hours. It's the mind that cannot. I'm gonna change the view to gallery view because I wanna see you. Feels a bit lonely. Medical history. I've been pregnant. I've had sex with a man who's had sex with men. I can't sleep. My mother's mother had asthma. My father had a stroke. My father's mother has high blood pressure. Both grandfathers died from diabetes. I drink, I don't smoke. Xanax for flying, propranolol for anxiety. My eyes are bad. I'm spooked by wind. Cousin Lily died from an aneurysm. Aunt Ilda, a heart attack. Uncle Ken, wise as he was hit by a car, as if to disprove whatever theory toward which I write. And I understand the stars in the sky are already dead. That's the happiest they get. So I don't know, gang. Happy Wednesday. All right, hysterical strength. Hysterical strength. When I hear news of a hitchhiker struck by lightning yet living, or a child lifting a 2-ton sedan to free his father pinned underneath, or a camper fighting off a grizzly with her bare hands until someone, a hunter perhaps, can shoot it dead, my thoughts turn to Black people. The hysterical strength we must possess to survive our very existence, which I fear many believe is and treat as itself a freak occurrence. How y'all doing? Y'all doing okay? Good. I see some thumbs up, some waves. Okay, good. Good, good, good. So this next poem is entitled, It's Not Fitness, It's the Lifestyle, and it takes its title from the motto, I guess, of Equinox, which is a luxury gym. It's called again, It's Not Fitness, It's the Lifestyle. I'm waiting for a white woman in this overpriced Equinox to mistake me for someone other than a paying member. I can see it now as I leave the steam room, naked but for my wedding ring. She'll ask whether I finished cleaning it. Every time I'm at an airport, I see a bird flying around inside, so fast I can't make out its wings. I ask myself, what is it doing here? I've come to answer, what is any of us? Okay. I will read Candelabra with Heads. This poem was inspired by a work of art by this artist called Thomas Hurston, and he's a sculptor. And what this is a group of mannequins wrapped in brown duct tape and mounted on a wooden structure. So this poem takes its title and it is inspired by that work of art by Hurston. Candelabra with Heads. Had I not brought with me my mind, as it has been made, this thing, this brood of mannequins cocooned and mounted on a wooden scaffold, might be 8 infants swaddled and sleeping, might be 8 fleshy fingers on one hand, might be a family tree with 8 pictured frames. Such treaties occur in the brain. Can you see them hanging? Their shadow is a crowd stripping the tree of souvenirs. Skin shrinks and splits. The bodies weep fat the color of yolk. Can you smell them burning? Their perfume climbing as wisteria would a trellis, burning. Their perfume climbing, fat the color of yolk. Can you smell them? Skin shrinks and splits, the bodies weep. Is a crowd stripping the tree of souvenirs? Can you see them hanging? Their shadow frames, such treaties occur in the brain. Might be a family tree with 8 pictured, might be 8 fleshy fingers on one hand, might be 8 infants swaddled and sleeping and mounted on a wooden scaffold, this brood of mannequins cocooned as it has been made, this thing. Had I not brought with me my mind, who could see this and not see lynchings? Okay. So this next poem is called In Defense of Candelabra with Heads. And it's inspired by the poem that I just read Candelabra with Heads. So in my chapbook called The Animal After Whom Other Animals Are Named, I included that poem Candelabra with Heads, but extracted that last line, who can see this and not see lynchings, at the suggestion of editors who I absolutely adore and respect. But for my full-length collection, I decided to include that last line, who can see this and not see lynchings, because I missed it and because the poem, I think, required it. So this next poem, called In Defense of Candelabra with Heads, thinks through that justification of including that last line in the full-length collection. In Defense of Candelabra with Heads. If you've read the candelabra with heads that appears in this collection and the one in the animal, thank you. The original, the one included here, is an example, I'm told, of a poem that could speak for itself, but loses its ability to do so by ending with a thesis question. Yeats said a poem should click shut like a well-made box. I don't disagree. I ask who can see this and not see lynchings, not because I don't trust you, dear reader, or my own abilities. I ask because the imagination would have us believe, much like faith, faith the original candelabra lacks in things unseen. You should know that human limbs burn like branches and branches like human limbs. Only after man began hanging man from trees, then setting him on fire, which would jump from limb to branch like a bastard species of bird, did we come to know such things. 100 years from now, October 9, 2116, 8:18 p.m., when all but the lucky are good and dead, may someone happen upon the question in question. May that lucky someone be Black and so far removed from the verb lynch that she be dumbfounded by its meaning. May she then call up Hershorn's candelabra with heads. May her imagination, not her memory, run wild. Oh, thank you. I see you. I see you. Thank you. All right, a short one. This is called Heretofore Unuttered. As if God, despite his compulsions, were decent and hadn't the tendency to throw off all appearance of decorum. Here I am, admiring this single violet orchid. How lucky am I to go unnoticed, or so I imagine, when at this writing, there's a red-tailed hawk somewhere tracking the soft shrills of newborn songbirds. This next poem is called Virginia is for Lovers, but before I read it, I want to first read the note at the back of the book, but I have the wrong book. It's in the paperback edition. Give me just one sec. All right, now we're cooking with gas. Let's find it. Okay, this is the note at the back of the book. Virginia is for Lovers. The poem shares its title with the tourism and travel slogan of the Commonwealth of Virginia, as the word legend in the poem is meant to imply the racist rhetoric of the settler myth. The speaker is not aligning herself with nor promoting a culture that gives rise to racism and white supremacy. Okay, that's that. Now I gotta find the poem. Virginia is for lovers. At LaToya's Pride picnic, Leonard tells me he and his longtime love, Pete, broke up. He says Pete gave him the house in Virginia. Great, I say. That's the least his ass could do. I daydream my friend and me into his new house, sit us in the kitchen of his 3-bedroom, 2-bath brick colonial outside Hungry Mother Park, where, legend has it, the Shawnee raided settlements with the wherewithal of wild children catching pigeons. A woman and her androgynous child escaped, wandering the wilderness, stuffing their mouths with the bark of choke cherry root. Such was the circumstance under which the woman collapsed. The child, who could say nothing except hungry mother, led help to the mountain where the woman lay, swelling as wood swells in humid air. Leonard's mouth is moving. 2 boys hit a shuttlecock back and forth across an invisible net. A toddler struggles to pull her wagon from a sandbox. No, Leonard says, it's not a place where you live. I got the H in V. H-I before my friend could finish, and as if he'd been newly ordained, I took his hands and kissed them. Okay. I've been reading for 15 minutes. I'll read for 15 more. Sound good, Megan? Okay. All right. This one is called Imagine Sisyphus Happy. Give me tonight to be inconsolable, so the death drive does not declare itself, so the moonlight does not convince sunrise. I was born before sunrise, when morning masquerades as night, the temperature of blood quivering like a mouth in mourning. How do we author our gentle birth, the height we were? Were we gods rolling stars across a sundog sky, the same as scarabs? We fit somewhere between God and mineral, angel and animal, believing a thing as sacred as the sun rises and falls like an ordinary beast. Deer sniff lifeless fawns before leaving. Elephants encircle the skulls and tusks of their dead, none wanting to leave the bones behind, none knowing their leave will lessen the loss. But birds pluck their own feathers. Dogs lick themselves to wound. Allow me this luxury. Give me tonight to cut and salt the open. Give me a shovel to uproot the mandrake and listen for its scream. Give me a face that toils so closely with stone, it is itself stone. I promise to enter the flesh again. I promise to circle to ascend. I promise to be happy tomorrow. Okay. This is called Even the Gods. Even the gods misuse the unfolding blue. Even the gods misread the wind flowers nod towards sunlight as consent to consume. Still, you envy the horse that draws their chariot, bone of their bone. The wilting mash of air alone keeps you from scaling Olympus with gifts of dead or dying things dangling from your mouth. Your breath like the sea inching away. It is rumored gods grow where the blood of a hanged man drips. You insist on being this man. The gods abuse your grace. Still, you'd rather live among the clear, cloudless white, enjoying what is left of their ambrosia. Who should be happy this time? Who brings cake to whom? Pray the gods do not misquote your covetous pulse for chaos, the black from which they were conceived. Even the eyes of gods must adjust to light. Even gods have gods. So I have in mind 1, 2, 3 more poems, but I want to read poems that you might want to hear and not just ones that I've curated for tonight. So if you want to put one in the chat that you'd like to hear, I'd be happy to read it. While you're doing that, I will read, instead of executions, I think death clue. Okay, I'll end with object permanence. Yeah, I'll end with object permanence. Clue is a longer one. Okay, I was gonna read the Cento. Should I read the Cento or Clue? Which do you prefer? Clue? The Cento or Clue? Cento, I see Cento. Okay. All right, I'm gonna read the Cento then. I'll do that now before I forget. 20. All right. Cento for the night I said I love you. Today, gentle reader, is as good a place to start. But you knew that, didn't you? Then let us give ourselves over to the noise of a great scheme that included everything, that indicts everything. Let us roam the night together in an attempt to catch the stars that drop. White clouds against sky come humming toward me, one closely resembling the beginning of a miracle. There's the moonlight on a curved path, lighting the purple flowers of fragrant June. I dreamed him, and there he was, silent as destiny, lit by a momentary match. Men are so clueless sometimes, like startled fish living just to live. We are dying quickly, but behave as good guests should, patiently allowing the night to have the last word. And I just don't know, you know? I never had a whole lot to say while talking to strange men. What allows some strangers to go past strangeness, exchanging yearning for permanence? And who wouldn't come back to bed? Love, how free we are, how bound, put here in love's name, called John, a name so common as a name sung quietly from somewhere, like a cry abandoned someplace in a city about which I know. Like blackbirds pushing against glass, I didn't hold myself back. I gave in completely and went all the way to the vague influence of the distant stars. I saw something like an angel spread across the horizon like some dreadful prophecy, refusing to be contained, to accept limits. She said, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" I love you, I say, desperate to admit that the flesh extends its vanity to an unknown land, where all the wild swarm. This is not death. It is something safer, almost made of air. I think they call it God. Some say we're lucky to be alive, to have a sky that stays there above. And I suppose I would have to agree, but the hell with that. It isn't ordinary. The way the world unravels from a distance can look like pain, eager as penned-in horses. And it came to pass that meaning faltered, came detached. I learned my name was not my name. I was not myself. Myself resembles something else that had nothing to do with me, except I am again the child with too many questions as old as light. I am always learning the same thing. One day, all this will only be memory. One day soon, for no good reason. Dying is simple. The body relaxes inside hysterical light as someone drafts an elegy in a body too much alive. Love is like this, not a heartbeat, but a moan. Can you see me sinking out of sight in the middle of our life? Should I be ashamed of myself for something I didn't know I? He walks by laughing at me. What else did you expect from this day forward? For better or worse? One life is not enough to remember all the things marriage is. This town at dawn can will away my lust to suck honey from the sunlight. So why am I out here trying to make men tremble who never weep? After all's said and after all's done and all arrogance dismissed, the distance rumbles in, sparing only stars. The moon, like a flower, survives as a pinion, making it almost transparent. The pieces of heavy sky, heavy as sleep. I close my eyes, and this is my life now. Great suggestion. I never read that poem, so I appreciate you requesting it. All right, so I think 2 shorties and then object permanence. Instead of executions, think death erections. I wish the day hadn't. Dawn has claimed another sky, its birds. I watch from my burning stake the broken necks. Once this lot allowed wildflowers. Nothing worse than bruised wildflowers. Darling dawn, death mask to which I've grown accustomed. Show me one pretty thing, no heavier than a hummingbird. Unframed. Handle this body. Spoil it with oils. Let the residue corrode, ruin it. I have no finish, no fragile edge. On what scrap of me have we not made desire paths, so tried as to bury ourselves therein? I beg, spare me gloved hands, monuments to nothing. I mean to die a relief against every wall. And object permanence will be my last from this, but then I'll just read a really quick excerpt from the longer project, and it's really short. It should take me about 1.5 minutes, if that. Object permanence. This is for my husband, John. We wake as if surprised the other is still there, each petting the sheet to be sure. How have we managed our way to this bed? Beholden to heat like dawn, indebted to light. Though we're not so self-important as to think everything has led to this, everything has led to this. There's a name for the animal love makes of us. Named, I think, like rain for the sound it makes. You are the animal after whom other animals are named. Until there's none left to laugh. Days will start with the same startle and end with caterpillars gorged on milkweed. Oh, how we entertain the angels with our brief animation. Oh, how I'll miss you when we're dead. Okay, thank you, thank you. And this is a short excerpt from the long project that I'm working on. It's an erasure of the Ferguson report, which, as you all know, details the corrupt court practices and policing in Ferguson, Missouri. So this is an erasure of pages 5 through 8. Officials found our conduct caused official harm. Officials found us at home in the high grass of relative safety, under a God elected by men. We are in contempt, he said. We violated the violations, he said, at which point we began to set in concert with the sun. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And as is customary for this, that I think it's important you actually get to hear your applause because you don't always get that on Zoom. So feel free to unmute yourself so Nicole can hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that beautiful reading and for sharing a piece from the new project that you're working on. I would love to hear a little bit more about that. But I do want to open it up to some questions from our attendees. I know that my students definitely have some questions. So please feel free to use the little hand raise function, or you can throw a question into the chat and we will get to as many as possible with the time we have allotted. So I see my first hand was from Arnisha, our watch party over there.
Yes, we're here. We're excited, and Nicole, thank you so much for being here. I love the book so much, and it's just what I need it to be. But my question is, I have so many questions, but I think the one that I want to ask is about your choice for the notes section. I know some people they don't like to put that. Maybe they feel like they're giving away information, but I thought the notes section was perfect. It really helped me understand the work in its entirety and feel like I was like placed in different parts where I may not have felt welcome. So why did you decide to have a whole note section in the back, maybe instead of doing asterisks and notes at the bottom, or what was your thought process with that?
Well, I wanted the poems to be the poems on their own. So but I did want to provide some context for the poems themselves, right? And I wanted the readers to know that many of these poems are inspired by other things. Like, while the work is mine, they were inspired by works of art. They were inspired by documentaries. And in one case, it's a found poem, a cento. So these are found lines by other poets. And I wanted to definitely give those poets their due. You know, without their lines, the cento wouldn't be. So I wanted to make sure that I acknowledged all of the many sources that inspired this work. But I did want them to be, the notes to be a separate thing from the poems, so as not to distract from the poems themselves.
Thank you. Great question to start us off, Arnisha.
Yes, thank you for that. And thank you for, I saw your clapping and your watch party. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for all that. Yes. Hey, back there.
All right, I think Mia, I saw your hand next, another little watch party going on over there.
A watch duo.
Yes.
Hey, Anna and Mia here. I was gonna ask, you utilize a lot of space on the poems that are shorter, and that's something that, you know, throughout your collection, those are the ones that hit the hardest for me because I paid so much attention to what words were on there. And I was wondering what was said or thought of in the empty spaces between those words. And that's something that kept recurring to me. So I guess my question is like, what's your process when you're writing something like that? Is it more of an erasure thing where you write kind of like a page and then you take out words? Or is it more of like a stream of consciousness thing where you're writing the poem and those are the words that stand out in order to make that into something that really does resonate?
Thank you for this question, Mia. Are you thinking about the short poems or the erasure on its own?
Yeah, I guess the erasure on its own is what really got me thinking about, you know, just that style and that form.
Yeah, I think, well, with Q, the erasure of clue, I was thinking about erasure itself as a form. And I was debating whether it was cheating, right? Because you have text in front of you from which to draw. And I was like, I don't know, is this a thing? Is this a form, right? So I wanted to try it out on my own work before, you know, using some other text. And so that's how Q was born. And the process, though it was a while ago, I think it was like this Ferguson project in that the words kind of lifted off the page for me. And I saw through the original text to the erasure, right? So for me, the erasure, the words kind of just lifted up, the ones that I wanted to keep, right? And the words that I wanted to raise kind of fell back in relief of the words that were lifted up. So I mean, I think it's, I think all poetry is magic, but for me, erasure is especially so. So yeah, and there's no, you know, hard and fast process rule thing with any form that includes erasure. So someone else erasing the same document might erase other words, right? So this is just happens to be my process, which is magic.
Thank you. Your reading was really awesome.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mia. So since we're on this topic of the form of erasure, I was wondering if maybe you could speak a little bit more about the current project that you're working on about this erasure of the Ferguson report and maybe a little bit about how that came about.
Well, I don't want to speak too much on it because I'm still working through the ideas in the poem, but I can say that I started in 2015. And I don't know how I began erasing the report other than this was a text and this was a text that just stood out to me, right? Like the work by Hurston stood out to me as one to be inspired by, right? So I started thinking about erasure as a form. And this was a document that I was thinking about and that my community was living through. And so it felt necessary and still feels necessary. Unfortunately, it is still timely. I honestly can't answer the question as to why one is inspired by one thing and not the other, but I can say that my obsessions include race and equity. And so of course I would be interested in the Ferguson report.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I was very compelled by the snippet that you shared, and I'm looking forward to seeing more, whatever it ends up being.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Delilah was next with a hand up with a question.
Yeah, so I actually haven't had the opportunity of reading your all of your work, or a decent amount. The first time I've heard it was today, but
Yeah.
honestly, it's so beautiful that I'm gonna go out and buy it. But no, it's just very inspirational, and it's real, and it's just, yeah, a lot of stuff is doesn't have that same approach, and I just really appreciated how you went about it. You're authentic, and I really love that. My question though is, sorry, just tangential, sorry. But my question is that there are a few reoccurring lines where you say, I suppose I agree, or I suppose that I have to agree, something along those lines.
Cinquecento?
I believe so, but I think that it was also in the poem that you wrote in defense of yes, yeah, you used that line a couple times, and I was just wondering if it was on purpose, or if it was just you trying, or you feeling like you have to somewhat agree to certain things, like if you felt pressured to agree, like I suppose I have to because that's what everybody is saying I have to do. I wasn't sure why you added it in there, like what was your perspective on it, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
Okay.
And what a great listener you are, because I had never realized that I used that
Sorry.
twice in the book. So thank you for calling me out on it. And
No,
the Cento,
no.
calling me out in a good way. Yeah, because I hadn't realized that. And I like to think about, recurring themes in the work. And if that's one, that's cool. So in the Cento, the excerpt that Delilah's referring to is on page 26. And the excerpt reads, "Some say we're lucky to be alive, to have a sky that stays there above. And I suppose I would have to agree." And then in the defense poem, page 55, it's maybe the 6th, 7th line down. Yeats said a poem should click shut like a well-made box. I don't disagree. I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I did that. And I don't know how much time elapsed between one poem and then I don't even know which came first. No, that's a lie. I do know. I think the Cento came before In Defense, because In Defense is I'm lying. I don't know. I don't know which came first. I don't know why I did that. But now that I'm seeing it, that's pretty cool. Someone was saying something?
Does it take you to write your poems? And are there very large intervals between them?
The Cento took me about 16 to 18 months. I had to mine my home library for lines that inspired me, right? I wrote down all the lines by hand. Here, I can show you. I keep some of my drafts, so here's the Cento. Here's the Cento folder. So these are the lines that I wrote. So like here's a bunch of lines. There's more lines. But this folder is just filled with lines that were used in in the poem, and words that and lines that I didn't use in the poem. So like the Cento took me 16 to 18 months, and that's because I had to mind my library. As I said, I wrote down all these lines, and I kind of used my dining room table as a space to kind of lay these lines out and just think about what would come first and what would come second, what would come third, and things like that. So I would kind of hover and kind of swim around this table for many months. Like we didn't eat in the dining room for over a year, right? My husband was like, yeah, WTF. So yeah, that poem took me long. The other poem, In Defense Of, I would say it took about 6 months, but that poem wouldn't have happened without the poem that it was inspired by, which is the Candelabra with Heads poem. So that had to happen before this other poem had to happen, right? And other poems kind of happen like that in the collection as well. Heretofore Unuttered, I had the first couple of lines like chilling in a drawer. I liked the lines and I was like, these need to go somewhere, but where, right? And it wasn't until my husband and I went to Home Depot and bought an orchid, and where that poem really opened up, and that orchid found a home in the poem. So too did the two lines find a home in that poem that they were kind of homeless before, right? So I think life needs to happen for these poems to happen, and these poems are in conversation with each other. So poems take long. The longest a poem has taken me has been maybe the 16 to 18 months thing, and then the shortest, maybe a week. But that happened once with one poem. Like, that never happens. So when it does happen, like, thank the gods for it.
Well, thank you so much. You're welcome. Yeah, it's so impressive that you have your files still. I hold on to my stuff.
Everything. So you never know when you're going to need a line. So I would keep everything. I mean, I do keep everything. So thank you, Delilah.
Yes, thank you. That was a great question. And I think, someone said this pleasures of being on Zoom is that we get to see, you can pull out your files during our conversation. It's awesome. Yeah. But we get to see a little bit of that magic, but also a lot of that hard work, that dedication. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So since we were kind of talking a little bit about the Candelabra with Heads, there was a question in the chat. Millie was saying that she was shocked to hear that your editor actually swiped full lines, especially one that made so strong of an impact. That was kind of a separate aside, but she was saying, on the other hand, you have a row of prizes and accolades. How does it feel to have such wide recognition, but still be in the throes of a divided country?
Oh, that's many questions. To the first question, my editor for the chapbook didn't kind of swipe that line, right? They gave me the option to keep it or extract it, and I followed their advice to extract it. As a newly published person, I don't think I knew how much power I possessed, and that they wanted me to be happy and knew that I knew best for my poems. I just didn't yet know that. And so while, they didn't force me to take out that line, I took it out because, I felt like it should be taken out based on the suggestions, right? But it was my choice. And it was my choice because I just didn't know how much power I had as the author of the poem. To your second question, more on that first question. So with the full-length collection, I realized like, editors aren't just going to pull a book because you disagree and want to add a line. Like, that's not what editors do. And so I thought that line was necessary for the poem. So too did these editors for the full length. And then, it's now in its original form. To your second question, the divided country, I mean, have we ever been on the same page? I feel like it's just more kind of obvious these days, but I don't know. I think we've lived in a Black and white country for as long as this country has been in a country. So I don't really know how to speak to that, because I don't know what it feels like to live in a country that feels like it's one country, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah.
And thank you, Millie, for that great question.
Yes, great question.
I think next up was, I think, Tyler.
Yes. Well, first of all, thanks for reading. And real quick, I wanted to ask about the title, and I know that the phrase "ordinary beast" appears in the poem "Imagine Sisyphus Happy," and I was just wondering if there is any significance to that. If you could just speak to that a little bit more.
No, it's not a significance at all. I originally wanted the book to be called Heretofore Unuttered. And my editors were like, no, we can't sell that. and thinking about it, like it is a mouthful, right? Heretofore Unuttered. So like I did with my home library, mining it for these lines for Cento, I like mined all the poems in my manuscript to see what phrases might stand out. And ordinary beast was one such phrase, right? It was between that and something stars, sparing only stars, which is still quite good, I think. But ordinary beast is just, it's a beast of a title. Like my editors were right on that call, you know, like they were right. Heretofore Unuttered, stop. I don't know what I was thinking.
Well, I guess,
thank you for that question, Tyler.
Yes, thanks, Tyler. And in some sense, you know, it can help to have a good editor on our side. And it's interesting, I mean, hearing about just the collaborative efforts, maybe thinking about that one line in Candelabra with Heads, but then, you know, had they not suggested that, maybe we wouldn't have gotten the second poem, which is such a punch in the gut and so impactful.
Exactly. Thank you, Megan.
Let's see. So we've got another question, I think, from Watch Party at Arnisha's house.
Hey.
Yeah, hey, go ahead.
Hi, I'm so excited to talk to you, Nicole. I feel like we're Twitter friends.
Yay.
But anyway, object permanence is another favorite of mine. Your poetry draws on so many sources like Piaget, and like the stage where toddlers close their eyes and then they think that you can't see them, right? So in this very sexy poem, how is it still such a measured voice, first of all? I'm thinking of the quote that we're not so self-important as to think that everything has led to this, everything has led to this. It's almost like a Buddhist koan. It's like, it's fabulous. How do you do that?
Oh my goodness. How did I do that? I mean, my husband was making us some blueberry pancakes one day years ago. Was he my husband then? No. And I kind of just looked at him while he was doing that, and I was like, God, I'm gonna miss you. Like when I die, I'm gonna miss you, right? So that kind of idea of missing life when you're beyond it was just one kind of fleeting kind of thought idea. I guess its way into this poem. Yeah, so it started with, you know, a real life thing a real life thing. And just thinking about love. I never thought about this poem as being sexy, but I'll take that. Yeah, I'll take that. I thought of it being having a sense of longing, although you're in the presence of the beloved, which is weird, but also not, because like you want to be as close to someone as possible, right? Even when you're near, like how can you get closer even when you're with them? How could you get closer? So I think this poem was thinking through that, thinking about loss, and of course, this is one of the poems that I wrote while getting an MFA. And originally, I have the drafts. I think it was like, I think it might have been a long column. And then one of my classmates, a really great poet, her name is Jameson Fitzpatrick, suggested that I make the poem in couplets because of the intimacy of the relationship. And so then it turned into couplets. So it was a combination. Writing this poem was a combination. All that to say is a combination of like this idea that I had, right? And help. I had my community to kind of help me craft this poem. And then I had that continued love that informed the poem. So all these things, right? I don't know, and magic. Like, I don't know how we do this. So thank you for that question.
Yes, always magic. All right, we are about at time, but I wanted to end on this question, and it's a bit long-winded, so bear with me, Nicole. I feel like your work really inspires such a sense of community and literary citizenship, because I mean it's wholly your aesthetic and your voice, but yet in the collection you call forward all of these other voices. We have like the sequence of sonnets, legendary. I mean, you have the cento with 100 poets contributing as well, and then you have other poems inspired by, as you mentioned earlier, works of art. And and I'm thinking about the importance of community, especially kind of moving forward in the state in which we're in, or getting back out there and trying to be with each other. So maybe what are some suggestions, if any, that you might have for ways in which we can strengthen our own poetic or literary community, or even work to enter a poetic or literary community if we're someone who's kind of new to the scene?
Well, I can tell you what I did. I took workshops at Canem Foundation, regional workshops. So I took like 10-week long workshops with poets like Willie Perdomo and Patricia Smith and Marilyn Nelson. And in those classes, I was able to form real relationships, those that like ones that have endured over more than a decade, right? I was in a workshop with like Ama Kojo and Robin Coast Lewis and other folks, right, through Cave Canem. So just, I don't know, taking workshops, community-based workshops where you can, when you can, right? Going to readings and open mics and kind of expanding your network in that way with like-minded individuals. Being friends with folks on Twitter. I mean, follow people who bring you joy. I mean, I feel like I don't necessarily need, I love poems. Poems fill me with so much joy, but I also need other joys, right? And so I follow, what is it called? on Instagram these, I think, Italian old ladies that make pasta in Italy. And I follow Little Black Babies, at Little Black Babies. Like just do things that bring you joy. Follow people who bring you joy. Be in community with like-minded people who, I don't know, who like poetry, believe in equity. I mean, just be kind to yourself and other people. It's not difficult, right? But it is. But also it is, because we have to constantly remind ourselves to be kind and to ourselves, and yeah, to be kind to ourselves. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but just put yourself out there, try to make friends. I myself am an introvert, so it's difficult for me to make friends. So I try my hardest to put myself in situations that will make me a little bit uncomfortable, but also grow me as a person. So yeah, it might be uncomfortable for a minute, but the gains are usually well worth it. Did I answer your question, Megan? I feel
yes, and more.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, not just
shut up.
Yeah, not just great writing advice, but also great life advice.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And thank you, Nicole, so much for your time, for your generous answers this evening. We were so excited about meeting you. So how about another round of actual applause? Let Nicole hear from you.
Thank you. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all for having me. Megan, thank you so much for facilitating this. Sandra, I'm seeing you there. Hi. So good to see you. And give my warm regards to Blas. And
thank you so much, Nicole.
Oh my goodness, thank you for having me. And I hope to meet you all out west sometime. And I'm going to go to every place on this list that you all have provided me. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. We would love to have you in person one of these days, sometime soon in the near future. So, well,
Yeah.
we're going to put that out into the universe. We're going to make it happen.
Put it out there. We're doing it.
All right. Thank you again so much. It was a delight meeting you and speaking with you and hearing from you, hearing your wonderful work. And thanks again for staying up late to join us here on the West Coast. We so appreciate you and your time.
Thank you so much, gang. Have a good week. Take care.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you again in the spring. Take care until then.